Thank you for inviting me. I have to say this is a little bit embarrassing because this is like coming home for me. And with all this welcome, I, along with a few other entrepreneurs, we were like wearing hard hats when Research Park was being built. When just one floor was laid, we were the guinea pigs who occupied the office, the AC wasn't working. And so to come back here with this kind of welcome, I'm so grateful. Thank you. Professor invited me to spend some time today, share the journey from Uniphore being an incubator at RTBI to what the company's become today. Jaya had numbers probably a couple of months older, 125 customers, close to 800 people in the company. We've raised a lot of money, valued at $2.5 billion. But I can tell you that this journey wasn't all bed of roses, and some of the glimpses that Professor mentioned. And the theme that I want to cover is the power of trying to create something without a plan B. And I think if I look back in time, that was the hallmark of our journey. So let's start with the time Uniphore was just a twinkle in Ravi and my eyes. Like Professor said, he has very good memory. We met him in Delhi. Our first company was called Singularis Technologies. And truth be told, Ravi and I had alternate careers waiting for us. We were finishing computer science engineering. And for some inexplicable reason, we were willing to risk it all. And I remember going to my father and I said, hey, Dad, are you comfortable if I give up my job offer and move to Chennai to work with Professor Junjunwala and try my hand at entrepreneurship? Not only did he say yes, but the way he said yes gave me the nudge. It took him 10 seconds and he said, absolutely. All right? And so Ravi and I moved to Chennai. We had decided that Singularis wasn't going to work. And we were willing to pivot into something new, which wasn't very clear when we were leaving Delhi as two non-Tamil speakers coming to Chennai, willing to make this our home. But what we were not willing to pivot was our dream of becoming entrepreneurs, of creating something. And so it was clear to us that we were going to be very rigid on the outcome that we were after, which is we wanted to be entrepreneurs. We wanted to create something substantial, but we were willing to be flexible on the path to get there. All right, so there was never a plan B. People confuse these things with having plan Bs. We did not have a plan B. Even when we came to Chennai, it took us a year to incorporate a company. Between 2007 and 2008, lots of experimentation, lots of late night project work, lots of negotiating with Professor and ICSR for funding to hire a person, get one computer, get one whatever. And trust me, at any point in time, we had alternate careers waiting for us. And meanwhile, our contemporaries who had studied with us were either doing MBA or they had picked up other jobs and they were beginning to do well in their careers. And here we were, still struggling to find our feet, getting that stipend from IIT Madras. There was never a day where there was a plan B. And so, one fine day, we incorporated Uniphore. And the story behind that, Uniphore's incorporation was April 23rd, 2008. The story behind that is IIT helped us raise about $100,000 US as seed money from a government organization called NRDC, all right? And NRDC decided that they were going to invest. It was 30, 40 lakh rupees back at the time. And we said, great. And we were going about our business as usual, thinking that money will come into our bank accounts. There was a problem. NRDC gave us a call on 20th of March and said, if we don't fund you by 31st March, there is no funding. And we said, okay, where would you fund us? We don't have a company. We don't have a bank account. Are you going to give the money to IIT? And they said, no, if you don't have a company, no funding, period. So we scrambled to register the company. We didn't have a name. We had all those brainstorming sessions in ESB. The folks at RTBI, we crowdsourced ideas. And we somehow convinced NRDC that, listen, we won't be ready by March 31st because company registration takes time. Can you please extend us? So the reason Uniphore was formed in April was because an investor said, here's money. If you don't take it, it's gone. All right? And so we were on our way. And the first few years were all about the technology that we had developed here at IIT, speech recognition for Indian languages, NLP. And it's hard to imagine in 2007, speech recognition, AI weren't a thing, especially Indian languages. The only available mature systems were in American English, and that too were vocabulary systems. They were not as free conversational as we are used to today with Siri and things like that. So we started working on those. And the initial customers, we went to banks, we went to hospitals, we went to government agencies and said, look, your consumers who are at the base of the pyramid, who are at tier 2 towns or villages, are not accessing your internet websites or your mobile apps, and they keep visiting your branches. And the reason they don't use a digital medium is because of lack of literacy. So here's a way to connect all of them in a village to a digital channel. Let them use their voice. Let them just talk to a feature phone in a language of their choosing, and let the app talk back in their language. And so this started the journey of us forming the initial idea of Uniphore. We started getting revenue from customers because the $100,000 wasn't going to last us too long. But then let me digress. Here comes the power, and in parentheses, the pain of tough feedback. Like Professor said, we consider ourselves tremendously fortunate for all the tough love that we received in that period. First was the hard realization, starting with Singularis, that there's going to be no customers for a great technology that you built. And if you don't have customers, you're going to run out of money, and who's going to support you? So we pivoted to Uniphore. As we started Uniphore, with those 30, 40 lakh rupees, with the $100,000, I remember Professor insisted we should create a board for the company. Now that was an unusual move for a company that didn't have revenue, hardly 5 people. We had a proper working board meeting every quarter. So in the third board meeting, Professor said, I see a problem. I said, what is it? Because I was making a great presentation in my head. And he said, looks like your money will run out in 5 months, the way you're running the company. And I said, yeah, I can see the math. He said, what's the plan after that? I said, you tell me. We came to IIT so you can help us. And if you were in that board meeting, you would cry. He, in no uncertain terms, told us that you run out of this money, that's on you, okay? This is the end of it. And believe me when I say in 30 days, we had revenue coming into this company. So that jolt, that tough love, was important for 2 young engineers who were merrily building technology to realize that it's really important to get customers, to get them satisfied, to get revenue from customers. And till date, the power of that feedback is so ingrained in the way we do business.
Can I interrupt you? I think I'll just add. It was actually much more cruel than he has made it out. Because what happened in the board meeting was one thing. Then I called them in my room in electrical sciences block. And for 1.5 hours, I kind of banged them with everything I had. And I said, this will not do. If your company closes down, then that 30 lakhs that has been invested in you by NRDC is also going to go. And I will not allow you to do that because of your foolishness. Now, it is an investment. It goes strictly. It is not that you can close the company. If you close the company, then you have to return these 30 lakhs. No, it was not there in their agreement. I got them to write in a piece of paper that they will personally return this 30 lakhs rupees, put it in an envelope, seal it, put it in my drawer. I said, now you can continue. If this 30 lakhs goes, you owe NRDC 30 lakhs. I often think about this. It was one of the hardest things. But they did that. They had no option. It is not that they had option. But I think that kind of toughness, sometimes I even cry that is that something that is required. But I think what they did over the next 30 days kind of validated that
If you can just stand a little to your
you
right.
have
There's
to
much
be
backlight behind.
tough when needed. Sorry to interrupt you.
Professor, I thought all that was going to be a secret till our grave, but now that you made it public, it was a blank sheet of paper, not a contractual paper. I knew that. So anyway, that got us going. But till date, the way we run our business, there are days, and there are several of you entrepreneurs and CEOs in the crowd, there are days when you wake up as CEO and as a founder, and you say, why am I doing this to myself? Like, it's just, is it worth it? And in every company, every CEO, big or small, has moments like that. Each time in the last 14 years since the founding of Uniphore, I've had one of those moments. Fortunately or unfortunately, the thought in my head is my mentor, who's way older than me, is still busting his tail at that age. And I have no right to even question. So I get out of bed and get going. Right now, we have, let's just say, a little more money in the bank than we had in the founding years. And yet, when me and my CFO sit down and do budgeting, we look at every penny, every dollar. And today, when I was reviewing with my team, there were some people complaining that, hey, if our management is worrying about one headcount and one whatever, then are you really serious about running the company? But that was the value of managing cash and managing every dollar that piece of paper taught us. And that's not going away ever, ever. So the power and the pain of tough feedback is tremendously critical for any founder, for any company's success. And since then, I've learned to seek it out. I not just wait for it to happen. I seek out mentors at different stages. Professor is always going to be my guru, but at different stages, we've had different people helping us. But then came the point, coming back to the story of Uniphore, that we embarked on what we didn't know then was a winding road to success, right? So when we started out building speech recognition, we said base of the pyramid, we went to these businesses and said, your customers, let them use voice. What became was our technology was being used by each customer uniquely in a bespoke way. So it wasn't really productized. We were doing custom versions of the product for each customer. And that's really hard to scale as a business. So 3 or 4 years went by, there was no more funding. Those were the years where VC funding wasn't a thing, hard to believe. And we found out that of the many use cases that our technology was being used, every now and then one use case would repeat. And that use case was coming from the contact center, the call center, all right? So the bank would say, okay, let's build a mobile app with speech in it, but can you do this for my call center? The hospital would say, let's do an IVR thing, but can you do this for my call center? So at some point around 2013, we said, looks like everyone, there's a long tail of use cases, but a repeated pattern here is the contact center. So our first pivotal moment was to start building products using our technology for contact center, right? And the power of productizing started to come in our lives. And that one move, building products, repeatedly selling the same product, allowed us in 2014 for the first time to raise our first external $1 million funding from Indian angels and Ray Stata, who's a billionaire in the US, former chairman of Analog Devices. And with that $1 million, we grew our team, expanded. In a year, we raised our Series A. This was 2015. And once again, this might surprise people. In 2015, when the investors were giving us a $5 million check of Series A, they said, we have one condition. I said, what is it? They said, you have great product, your customers speak very highly of you, but the way you're selling it is wrong. Your business model is wrong. And we need you to adapt to this new business model called SaaS, Software as a Service. 2015. What seems obvious today, we were selling our software as licenses and maintenance dollars, right? And we said, of course, anything for $5 million. You want us to dance? Of course, we'll do it. In my head, all they were asking me to change my billing model to equal monthly installments. And I said, how hard could that be? So I'll get your money. I'll make it easier for my customers to buy. Instead of paying me a big check up front, they'll pay me equal monthly installments. Win-win. What I didn't realize, that transition, that business model change, took a revenue-generating company to 6 quarters of zero revenue. Because that transition was tougher than I imagined. We had to change the way we were building product, the way we were servicing customer, the way we were selling it, and it's not just a billing model change. And we nearly burned through all of the $5 million in those 6 quarters. So it was near fatal for us. And yet again, there was never a plan B. I can tell you honestly now, even in those days, Ravi and I would come into office worried about making payroll in a few months, but not once having the thought that, what else can we be doing? All right, because we were rigid on the outcome. And so we just hustled, we partnered with our customers to say, what will it take? What do you need us to do? We need this to work. And fortunately, we recovered like this. So what went like this just came up like this. It was a hockey stick effect the minute that SaaS model was working. And it was working enough that in 2016, I met the former CEO of Cisco, John Chambers, at a conference in New Delhi. And he decided to lead our Series B round of $11 million, right? Because for him, he didn't know all the history. He didn't know the near-death experience and coming back. He saw the success. And he said, this has legs. And I can take you guys, make you global, so I'm willing to invest. And that was the next pivotal moment. This was the first time we had a mentor who had seen business at bigger scale. We had, for the first time, capital. Even in 2016, $11 million could be stretched for an Indian company quite far. And so we said, now the move we need to make is we need to expand beyond India, right? Because India has a limited available market. So I used my board and professor to convince my co-founder, because he wouldn't listen to me. He needed some convincing. And I asked him to move with his family to Singapore, all right? And first he said no. He said, you know, my parents are getting old, I can't go. Then he said, my son is entering school, I can't go. And then I got the board to talk to him. So he thought it wasn't my idea, but the board's idea. And then he came to me and he said, listen, I've agreed to go, I'll go. But do you really think we have enough money in the bank to sustain like my costs in Singapore? And I knew we didn't. And I said, of course we do. Ravi, I'm going to take care of you. Just go. And so he moved to Singapore. And I remember one time he called me in the early months. He said, hey, Umesh, I need a favor. I said, what is it? He said, can you transfer my next paycheck in advance? I said, what happened? He and his wife had discovered a casino in Singapore. Okay? And they had blown the last paycheck. So I said, I'm going to do it. But can you please stop going to the casino until we have more money in the bank? And so, once again, we took that plunge, could have gone anyway. We were running out of money. But that move could not have been more brilliant. We were growing at nearly 100% year on year before Ravi moved. As soon as the Asia markets kicked in for us, our growth rate went to 300%. Right? And so, yet again, the move could have gone south, but we knew that was the right move to make because we were rigid on the outcome, flexible on the path, and it succeeded. It succeeded enough that in 2018 we said, we've conquered India, it's working well, we've conquered Asia, it's working well. If you're really serious about this business, and we want to make it big, we have to win in North America. That's the single biggest market for us. And if you want to win big in North America, the headquarters of the company needs to be there, the CEO needs to be there, go all in. There is no plan B. North America, it is. And this time we were even closer to running out of money. But now I convinced my wife, along with my 3-year-old daughter in 2018, to move to North America. And at that point, 10 years into making, we had raised $16 odd million in capital. We were $7 or $8 million in revenue. And our last valuation was around $34, $35 million. Right? So 10 years into the making, it was an okay company. You're doing okay. You're well known in India and Chennai. Media was covering us, innovative technology. And the CEO decides to leave all this, to leave this office and become employee number 1 in North America, hit pavement, become the first sales guy all over again, knowing fully well, without telling my wife, that we might be running out of money in 6 months. And yet again, with some fortune and some luck, within the first couple of months, we landed the largest health insurer, the largest telecom company in the US. And that helped us raise a $50 million Series C round in less than 6 months of me moving to the US. Once again, the move could have gutted the company. We were running out of money, US became expensive, I started to hire in the US, but it was the right thing to do. Without that, there was no growing up. There was no growing the business. And so here comes the power of perseverance. As soon as we raised the $50 million, conversational AI, speech recognition was a very fragmented space. There were companies like Nuance who were known, but a bunch of startups. And this funding round and the media announcement put us on the map, in not just US, but around the world. The best talent started to show up at our doorstep. For the first time, I built an executive, real leadership team. Bigger customers started to come to us. And between 2018, when I landed on the shores of US with $34 million of valuation and $16 million total raise, between 2018 to 22, in the next 4 years, we raised over $600 million. Our valuation jumped from 34 million to 2.5 billion, and our revenue climbed from 8 million to nearly 100 right now. All right? And so if you think about that story, the first 10 years were a grueling struggle that a lot of us who are founders are very familiar with. Now, sometimes it's 10 years, sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's 4, but it was a slow, grueling struggle where every penny had to be collected by the customer to make payroll, and sometimes beg, borrow, or steal to make ends meet, but stay in the game long enough. And when luck shines and when opportunity comes about, we were the company ready to be selected as the winner. So my other mentor, John Chambers, tells me, you know, Umesh, what's the definition of luck? I say, I don't know. What's the definition of luck? It's just luck. He says, it's years of being prepared and then grabbing the opportunity when it presents itself. The power of persevering, the power of just staying in the game long enough, the power of doing that without ever having a plan B, that, oh, this is not working, I can do something else. Oh, this is not working, let me do an MBA. Oh, this is not working, let me take up a job. Or let me shut this down and start a different venture. If you have conviction in what you do, then you just have to go all in without a plan B. And sometimes, if you're prepared long enough, the opportunity does present itself, and you just have to be in the ring playing at the moment. But what's the other lesson here? Did we really have to send Ravi to Singapore? We were doing okay. Did I really have to move to Silicon Valley? Why those 2 locations? Did we have to make the acquisitions that we did last year? Once again, we had the money in the bank, but we acquired 4 companies in 1 year, which is unusual for a startup of our size to do. And the point I'm trying to make is each time in this journey, we have pushed ourselves outside of comfort zone, outside of conventional wisdom, to do something that we are convinced is the right move. Okay? It could go wrong, it could go terribly wrong. But without worrying about failure, we went for it. Why were we able to do it? Because we never had a plan B. The number of times in these 14 years where Ravi and I, who's right now in Singapore, I live in US, but we speak several times a day even now on phone. The number of times in these 14 years we've told each other, as long as you and I are together, we'll face anything. And that power to know that we are invincible. We can go down, we'll come back up. This move can be a mistake, but it's worth doing it because you and I, we can rebuild anything. We're not going anywhere. And so that power to a founder makes you invincible. Okay? So in parting, I'd say my learning or any lesson to another founder, another CEO, is first, be very rigid on the outcome, but be extremely flexible on the path to get there. Don't confuse on, oh, this is my vision, this is my conviction, I will not listen to any other feedback. That's not what I'm talking about. The being rigid on the outcome was, we were out to create a large company. We're still out to create a large company. And we will continue to be on this path. But at the same time, constantly willing to pivot, listen to advice, listen to feedback. Second, the power of feedback, seek it out. Don't shy away from receiving tough feedback, because that's what gives you external validation. And finally, just stay hungry, stay committed, because that's what drives outcome. So in parting, where is Uniphore going next? We've achieved a good valuation, revenue is doing well, good team, etc. Once again, I'll end with a story of what Prof and I discussed a few years ago. At one point, I called Professor from US, and I said, Professor, we've just crossed $100 million of valuation in one of the rounds. And he said to me in Hindi, he said, very good, the day you cross 100 million in revenue, we'll talk. So I know he will now be satisfied when we'll cross 2.5 billion in revenue, not valuation. So that's where we're good.
Thank you, Umesh. It's one most wonderful thing. I want to just add and then leave it and then open the question answer. Yesterday we spent 2.5 hours. And this is something that I've noticed in many cases. I think when you raise that 30 lakhs rupees, 30 lakh, $100,000 that time was 30 lakhs. For a few days I thought you were relaxed. You have raised money. Now what can defeat you? And probably little longer time you kind of remain relaxed. And that's a time that unfortunately or fortunately I did that beating. I saw the same thing several times. But what I saw, that when he had raised your $34 million or 16, whatever number you had raised, I saw that even 2 days after you're raising that much money, you're not relaxed. You already were working on what all can happen, what can go wrong, how will you manage, what will you do. Well, anyway, that's a past. When I heard about the $400 million that he recently raised and $2.4 billion value, I thought, it's done. Of course, he has promised me $10 billion, so he has to still get there. But I thought that he's now made it. Yesterday's conversation was very revealing. What I found, without getting into too much detail, that I don't know how many days you enjoyed your $400 million. But very soon, probably a week down the line, he was starting to analyze every aspect of what can go wrong in the world, in his business, in every division, what can change, and how in each case I will make changes. And yesterday the conversation was how bad the overall investment climate has become. The conversation was what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in all of that. The world is getting beaten. And in that kind of situation where anybody can feel very uncertain, and plans that was made can totally get overturned. I saw a very deep analysis on every aspect and how will I move forward. So, and I was absolutely amazed by and actually I agreed to everything. In fact, I was simultaneously working, and many of these thinking I was also doing, but not, of course, anywhere deeper, as deep as you. But every single thing figured out what I will do for the next few years. How will I keep on growing? How will I become the top company in the world? How will I cross $10 billion, and what all I will do? In fact, I remember calling Rima yesterday evening, and I said, one of the most amazing, what I found, your success to $0.4 billion and all the other things that you talked about is great. But what I talked about, how alert you are, what is the next step? And can you talk about that, the challenges ahead, and how are you going to cope up with it? Particularly in a situation, then world is going through a lot of uncertainty. What will you like to talk about and say how you are going to transform the company, and where will the company be if a few years down the line? So this is my only question. After that, I'll leave it to the...
Sure. So first, what I shared with Professor is, the fact that the US stock market has come down dramatically since the beginning of the year. It's a combination of things beyond my control: inflation, the US Fed increasing interest rates, the war in Russia and Ukraine creating uncertainty, China doing its own thing. The blessing in disguise is that when we were raising our Series E round, the $400 million, we were on a very accelerated path. We had advertised that fundraise to investors as the last raise before the company will go public. Okay? And there was anticipation and there was discussion of how quickly can we get there and what it's going to take, etc. The best news is there is no time pressure anymore. All right? The investors are relaxed, we are relaxed. It's all about building a good business. And so for me, that's the first thing to keep in mind, that what's my time frame, what are my variables, what am I dealing with? The second, then I evaluate every stage of the business. Even when I look at a new business, there are 3 types of risks that any business has. First is a market risk. Is there a market for your product? Or even if there's a market, how competitive is the situation? How large is the market? The second type of risk is financial risk. There can be a huge market. You can have a great product. Do you have enough fuel in the tank to run the play you want to run, right? Because sometimes for a large idea to gain critical mass, you need to invest for a period of time before it starts to catch on. So there's a financial risk. And the third is execution risk. There's a market, great product, you got money in the bank. Can you now execute to your plan? All right? And so fortunately for Uniphore, the first 2 do not exist. The market is tremendously large. We are 3 times the size of our nearest competitor in the space. So not worried about competition just for a minute. No financial risk. Enough fuel in the tank. And so the only risk to therefore put all our energy behind is the execution risk, right? We have now 5 products that we sell in the market. We do business in 17 countries, about 800 people. And our people are spread out between US, Israel, Spain, India, and Tokyo. So it's a very spread out team. And this team has grown very rapidly. So a lot of the people are very new to the business. They haven't seen the early years of struggle. They're not part of the culture. They're learning on the job. And so the execution risk of getting this all to come together, not letting any one of the 5 products go on a tangent, not letting any one of the 17 countries go on a tangent, not letting any one of the offices build a different culture than the rest of the company. The ability, even as we grow big, to make very dynamic and agile moves, right? As something changes in the world, we might do a quick full stop and pivot, take a 90-degree turn, move fast on another direction. It's much easier to do that when you're 5, 20, 50 people. It gets very hard when you have 800 people and growing. And everyone is very talented and have their own ideas. So the biggest risk we have to overcome, and that's where all the energy is on execution risk. We have the right strategy. Now we put very tight measurement. We measure every aspect of the business. My chief of staff, Kelsey, is here, runs the office extremely tightly. We have so much data about our own business now, almost on a real-time dashboard that is unbelievable. I can tell you at any given point of time which part of the machine is failing. All right, and you can then insert yourself to lift that part of the machine so the whole machine is still cranking and moving at full speed. And so all I can say without getting into our 5-year goals or on plan or whatever is that we intend to constantly grow at extremely high growth rates because the market is too large. We have the fuel in the tank. Our momentum is extremely strong. Like all stages, there are a few areas of our business that need attention right now. We have absolutely the right people, the right focus, and we constantly evaluate ourselves against the goals and the data. So I feel very bullish, but we will report back on every milestone.
Okay. So thinking on feet, continuous thinking. Things are never over. I mean, it is not that the struggle is over. Struggle for entrepreneur just continues. I think that's the most interesting aspect. Can we have questions now? Any questions, comments? Yes. Just your name, who you are, and then question.
Hello everyone, my name is Shwayari and I am a student at IIT Madras in my third year. First of all, thanks a lot for this inspiring talk, sir. Sir, I just wanted to ask, as you mentioned, right, developing perseverance, developing the strength to be invincible, right? It all comes, one major factor which I felt by a talk, it's about the people you have, right? Be it your co-founder, professor, and your mentors. So as a college student, what actions should we take during our college life to find these people or to develop this community? What am I doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have to say that, look, there's 9 in a 10 chance for any startup to fail. That's just statistics. And the one thing that dramatically increases the chances of success of a startup is doing it with a co-founder as opposed to doing it alone. It's a dramatic difference. Now, there's also a rule of too many. You can't have 5 co-founders, but 2, maybe 3 is an ideal set. And you're right, that relationship is almost like being with a spouse, right? Because you will be subject to tremendous joys and tremendous challenges all together, right? And you have to be able to trust your co-founder almost with your life. And so as you can imagine, that's a very hard thing to develop. But as a student, I met Ravi in the first year of my engineering, right? These are the years to develop those relationships, those friendships. And some of those relationships, some of those friendships could turn out to be the partnership that you desire. The other thing to keep in mind is ideally have complementing skill sets, right? So if one of the co-founders is strong in technology, the other one will have to be stronger in go-to-market, in sales or marketing, etc., so that the team can complement each other. Ravi and I didn't have that when we started. We were both computer science students, inexplicably exactly same GPAs. His name starts with R, mine with U, not too far, but exactly same GPAs. But when we started the business, we realized that we have to split responsibilities, and therefore skill sets have to be. Neither of us knew how to sell to customers. So I said, Ravi, let me learn that. Can you run the technology for a little bit? And then there was a brief period when he moved to Singapore to sell, and I said, okay, I'll take care of technology for a brief period, etc. And so I think your question is spot on, having co-founders, having mentors, and then eventually having a team becomes the recipe for success.
Thanks.
Yes.
Hello sir, my name is Abhishek. I'm from third year civil department. My question is previous. You were working on a far-fetched technology in 2008, right? So how difficult was it for you to convince this business owner that I'm working on something which will be useful for you in future? How did you get them on board? Being a 20 or 21 year old student, right? Like they don't listen to us. From my personal experience, right?
Yeah, they don't listen to us. They still don't, by the way. So I remember once a professor had told somebody very proudly that he used the fact that for Ravi and I, ignorance was truly bliss. Okay? Here's what he meant. What professor was telling us in all those years, that if you guys can't even develop multiple Indian language speech recognition system, what good are you? Why did you even come here? Go back to Delhi. And not only was he saying that, we 100% believed him. We were truly ignorant about how hard this shit could be. Nobody had done Indian language speech recognition, and he was just making use of how gullible we were, and we went along with it. If that hadn't been the case, we would have taken a slightly simpler problem to solve. And by the way, that ignorance was also how we sold to customers. I wasn't faking it when I was showing up. My first customer was a Fortune 100 company called Thomson Reuters, okay? And it was a cold call. They had announced in newspaper that Reuters was launching a service for farmers in India, okay? So through either professor or somebody on the board, I got an introduction to the CEO of Thomson Reuters, okay? And I cold called him. And the pitch I made must have been very passionate, but I wasn't faking it. When you're 21, it's hard to fake it. You have to believe in it. And they said, okay, we'll give you a shot. They were launching this service on SMS, and we said, hey, farmer will not read your SMS. They need to hear it in voice in their language. And so our first customer was Thomson Reuters. So it's one of those where when you want to change the world, the only currency you have is your passion. Because, who knows? Projects can fail, R&D can fail, experiments can fail, but you have to be rigid on the outcome. You should be flexible on the path. If something fails, quickly pivot, try another thing. But be very rigid that you will solve it, you will do it. There's no plan B. Make sense?
Hi sir. Myself Shashank, I'm in my third year again from civil department. So my question here is, like, at times when you build products, you're kind of attached to the ideas, and like, yes, I'll build it, I'm very rigid to it. And then you have that realization, like, I don't think this would work, like this can't be scaled enough, right? So something like what happened to Singularis and now Uniphore. Then you jump to Uniphore. So what was your mindset then? Like, how did you took that setback and then moved on to building something another?
Yeah, quite honestly, the pivot between Singularis and Uniphore was hard. We had registered the company, we had picked a name, you get very emotionally attached to those things. We had 2 patents, by the way. So,
How many people have joined?
but I'd say it takes humility. And that's a trait that's really important to develop. You should be very proud, very confident of what you're doing. But the humility, when somebody shows you with logic and with data that, hey, what you're doing will not work, this is wrong. The humility to accept that I was on a wrong path, that is really hard. And it gets harder the bigger you get. Because you can start to think, I know more than you. Look at what I've done.
figure out a way.
But
Should have been
I am always open to even you as an outsider telling me what's wrong in my company. I may or may not agree with you, but I have the humility to listen.
much more.
Right? And that's truly
this.
important.
This YouTube lectures are not.
Umesh, Karthik here. I'm co-founder of a neurotech startup called Neurostellar. I think I spoke to you some days ago. So I just have, first of all, congratulations to all things, and I'm a huge fan of Uniphore. With a huge number of employees growing and as the company is growing, I just want to understand how do you leverage data to really understand your employees, and also how do you view, how is the company attrition rate, and how do you deal with those kind of problems in leveraging data?
Yeah, let me give you a fact that should startle you. We are a SaaS company, but we use close to 130 SaaS products in the company. We have a SaaS product for anything that you can point to me. HR, we have 7 SaaS products. Marketing, we have 13 SaaS products. Sales, we have 20 SaaS products. We have invested in so much technology inside the company, and it's taken a lot of effort to bring all that together in a data lake, that we can at real time talk about which office has what attrition, how many are we recruiting at a given point of time, what's the performance rating across different functions, what's the gender breakdown, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So getting data and running your business with data level decisions as opposed to gut, that becomes increasingly important as your scale starts to become bigger. In the early days, that's not important. Don't waste money on that. But as you know, and you will know when that's happening, when you're beginning to lose feel of the business, when it's getting too much for the founder, that's when you need data. Attrition, I think we overall do well. We're in different markets. Our attrition in US is very different from India. India is a difficult market right now to attract talent, to retain talent. Silicon Valley, Israel, they all have different rhythms for us. But we benchmark ourselves with the best companies in each market, and we measure ourselves against them, and for the most part, we're doing well. Look, attrition is a very complicated subject. Contrary to popular belief, people don't leave a company for money, for better opportunity, for the desire to do something else. Those are the top 3 things people will say on their way out. But those are not the top 3 things, far from it. The number 1 reason somebody leaves a company is because of a bad manager. That their manager is just not treating them well. And then all these become excuses. Oh, I'm going for a better pay. I got a different opportunity. Oh, my heart's not in it. I'm going somewhere else. The number 2 reason is people don't feel appreciated.
Please call Bala.
Okay? People feel I'm slogging, but all I get is brickbats.
Get it up.
Nobody's appreciating my work.
Things can't happen.
And then all of those other reasons follow. So a lot of times managers and CEOs and companies waste time in trying to solve this salary benchmarking, and we got to be top of the market, and we got to overspend to hire, otherwise Google will steal our employee. But that's not true. If your company has a tremendous mission that the people buy into, if you built a great culture where people feel rewarded and feel part of, if you have good managers, that's the recipe to control attrition. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Raj.
Yeah, hi, Umesh. Congratulations on the achievements of Uniphore. It's fantastic to hear that. My question to you is a little more on the strategy side. In terms of my own experience, I was for about 13 years with a startup in the US, SaaS business. We pivoted from a license model to a recurring revenue model. A lot of similarities with what you're doing. Went through a series of acquisitions. I was not the founder or co-founder, but I was kind of pretty close to where some of the decisions were being made. And the company went public, and we the shares at about $25. Then there were some problems happened. Fundamentally, I think the problem with that company was that the acquisitions. When you acquire these companies, there's this, you mentioned earlier, I think, about the culture of these various companies. The company based out of, some of these companies might be in the US, some of these in Europe, some of these in Japan. So the question really becomes 2 things. One is the culture of the company, and number 2, if you have any plans to integrate these products of these other companies into one, maybe a humongous platform or whatever it is. These 2 fundamental reasons, I think, were the reasons why the company that I was for almost 13 years I have failed.
Yeah, and by the way, 8 out of 10 acquisitions fail. So wasn't unique to your company. But yet, acquisitions are a great tool for driving businesses' growth. John Chambers did 180 acquisitions during his tenure at Cisco. And even after him, Cisco continued to acquire. So companies who do that well give themselves tremendous leverage of differentiation of growth against their peers. Some of the things that we've done well, first of all, we have 2 separate teams. One is corporate development, which is the team that scouts for opportunities, does the due diligence, does the negotiation, the deal, and a separate integration team. And the principles for both of those teams are different. The acquisitions we've done are of 2 kinds. We either acquire companies which are pre-revenue or very small, only for the tech and talent. We like the tech, it's adjacent to us, and the talent pool is interesting to us. Or we have a stated goal. We are out to dominate the world. It's global domination, so we go after land grabs. So we do acquire, at times, companies with good product, but some customers and revenue. However, the rule there is the acquired revenue should, at any given point of time, be less than 8 or 9% of our size. For 2 reasons. One, that's when they become easily digestible, okay? And the chances of error go down. And second, you never want the world, the customer, to get confused of, hey, what was acquired and what are you, right? So you want the core to be always. The second thing is, it can be a great product, great team, exactly the right customers for the right price. The one reason I will still walk away from a deal is if the culture doesn't match mine. If that company was built in a different way than mine, I will walk away. It can be whoever in the world. Because if you acquire a wrong culture fit, and it's not about my is better than yours, it's just we are different culturally in the company. If you're tough and rumble and I value my people, we will never get along well, right? So let's not do this. The next thing is from an integration standpoint, I realized once the acquisition is done, corporate development are like salespeople. They're mercenaries. They want to get to the next target. They completely forget that the real work begins now of integration. We integrate the company on day 1. Right? It doesn't remain a separate entity. Websites get shut down, it's our product, customers are ours, everything ours. I realized integration, the biggest stumbling block is that there's a lot of politics. You know where? Not in the acquired company, but in the acquirer company. Because the parent company which is acquiring, people get worried about job security. Oh, new talent is coming from that company. Will I have my job? Will my department stay intact? And a lot of politics start to happen. So I realized my integration team should report to either me or another senior executive part of the leadership team of the company so that we can break glass within our own company when that happens, all right? And we've developed that muscle really strongly. And the final piece of the puzzle here is we really take good care of founder or CEO of that acquired company. I will never do an acquisition if the founder and CEO have an intention of leaving after getting acquired. And to really put our money where our mouth is, we have a rule in the company that's called the Maria rule. You want to know what's the Maria rule? So the first company we acquired was a Spanish company, and the CEO of that company is Maria Pachovi. And because she's the first CEO, I made a deal with her and I put it in the contract. I said for the first year after acquisition, she has a 51% veto over me. If I make any changes on her team, if I fire them, they don't have a job. Now I can move them around in the company, but if I'm letting go of somebody, she can veto me out for the first year, right? And that builds so much trust in the incoming CEO that they become a champion to make sure the integration is successful. So we've done 4 acquisitions, and we tell every acquisition that we will follow the Maria rule with you. All right, so it's a science and an art, as you know, but so far we've been very successful, and we're going to keep pace of doing that.
Great, thank you.
So, one second. I think this is something amazing, Umesh. Yesterday also you mentioned much of this. You didn't mention Maria rule, but the how to acquire company and what are you looking at, and all that. Yesterday in our conversation it came. And it struck me that something that has been very well thought out. I've not seen such clarity from others. Where did you acquire that clarity? Before you ask the question I want. When and where did you acquire that clarity?
That's a hard one. I don't think there's any one given source. Professor, as you know, I treat myself, I live my life like a sponge. I'm constantly learning from people who may know they're teaching me or may not know they're teaching me. I can watch somebody's YouTube video and a keynote speech and learn from it. When I'm pitching to a customer, I learn from them. I learn from active mentors. People like John Chambers have shared a lot of their lessons of doing acquisitions and things that went wrong. But fundamentally, it's really about first principles. To being honest to what your business is, why are you acquiring, and being very clear how will you measure success of that acquisition. And once you define those, then you can trace backwards. If success looks like X, and in 12 months I need to have achieved this after an acquisition, then what should I be doing to make that happen? All right? And it's really to the detail of, for the incoming company, what will each one of those people be doing in our company? What will be their title? Which team will they go to? Right? How will I manage conflict? If I have a head of marketing there and a head of marketing here, how do I manage that conflict? How do I take care of the personal situation where, think about it, you've been in acquisitions, your company is being acquired, you were the top person in marketing, now you will no longer be, so there's a human angle to this, right? And it's really about paying attention to those things. Because the power, if done well, is amazing. And if you miss those details, things can go terribly wrong. I mean, these acquisitions are not cheap. You're spending a bunch of your currency in acquiring another business. So it's just hearing from others and applying first principles thinking.
Last question.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sachdev. I have a very specific advice that I'm seeking. So we have been headquartered here in India for the last 10 years, but of the recent past, last 2 years, we have been seeing tremendous growth in North America. We have always been debating, should we continue with a reseller mode or in the US? So should we start up in the US? If so, is there a specific place like Delaware that we should prefer, or should the proximity to customer be the deciding
Sure.
factor?
So first, Sabri, congratulations. You're another story that's just not given up and being around all these years. So let me ask you, in your opinion, is North America going to be disproportionately larger than other markets?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't think it's a question of should you resell or should you set up an office. The question is, when are you moving to North America? That's really the question. I'm serious. If that is the single largest market, the CEO cannot be away from the single largest market. And the reason is not just sales. You sometimes need to redo your product, redo your marketing pitch, redo your positioning. And the only person in the company who can move many chess pieces at the same time is the CEO. Nobody else in the company can make that move as fast as you can, right? So you register a company in Delaware. That's the easiest. Gokul sitting behind you can connect you to a CPA in New Jersey who can do that. And then you need to be the first salesperson. Resellers are fine, but you have to go win the market yourself.
Thank you.
Though we had finished the last question, but I don't. Rima can always overrule me, so go ahead.
Umesh, Uniphore started from India and has gone over the world. We are really proud and happy about it. For growth, you moved out. Now you are there. Will we see a time when Uniphore come back to India and then start operating and leading the product out from here?
So let me dispel the notion. We are absolutely in India. This is our single largest employee location, and we continue to grow this. If there's one country where we're adding more headcount than others, that's India. Okay. Also, it's not just India and building product. Unique to Uniphore, unlike many of my Silicon Valley peers. Look, we all read the news and we recognize that given India's GDP growth rate, within this decade, India will be third largest economy after US and China. We as a company have stated that we will not do business in China.
Thank you.
We are in US, and so the third largest economy becomes India. The fact that we already we've crossed a $10 million rate in India and growing. As India becomes bigger, we will have the single largest market share of customers in India. So it's a big market for us. It's our core development center. Now, it's not the only one. We have Israel and we have Silicon Valley as well. But make no mistake, our products have a lot of the stamp on components made in India all the way through. So we are very much an Indian company.
Thank you.